A dying woman sits at the mouth of a dark cave. She has less than 2 days to live, and she is telling her son exactly what happened inside the Garden of Eden, details that directly contradict everything the Western world was taught.
Quick note before we begin. This script is a dramatized retelling inspired by the Ethiopian apocryphal text known as the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, also connected to the Cave of Treasures tradition. It is a work of creative narration, not a verified historical or scholarly account, and any expert voices in this telling are illustrative rather than direct quotations from real individuals. With that said, let's step into the story. At the mouth of a cave carved into a lonely mountainside, an old woman sits with her back against cold stone. Her breathing is shallow. Her hands, lined with nearly 1,000 years of labor, rest in her lap. She is the first mother of the human race, and in a matter of hours, she will be gone. But before she lets go, she has one final task: to tell her son Seth what she alone remembers. What paradise actually looked like before the world broke. This is the story the mainstream Bible never tells in full. It survives instead in a quieter tradition, preserved for centuries in the monasteries of the Ethiopian islands, copied by hand in the ancient Guizi script, guarded long after most of the Western world stopped asking what Eve might have said in her final days. She begins, as the old story goes, not with regret, but with light. The light of Eden, she tells Seth, was nothing like the sun that now rises and sets over their exiled lives. It did not come from one place in the sky. It rose out of the ground, drifted from the leaves, pulsed faintly from the rivers themselves, as though the entire garden had been built from something more alive than ordinary matter. She describes the river Pishon, one of the 4 that watered paradise, its bed lined with gold that did not sit still the way gold sits in a vein of rock. It moved, she says, like something breathing beneath the current, visible even where the water ran fast and deep. She remembers fish that came to her hand without fear, birds that circled close enough to brush her shoulder, and a serpent, before its fall, more radiant than any creature that walked the earth. Then she comes to the tree. Not its fruit, not its danger, but its presence. She tells Seth that to stand near the tree of life was to feel something settle inside you, a stillness that made fear seem like a foreign idea, something that simply hadn't been invented yet. She says she can still recall its scent, after centuries of dust and thorn and hard ground, as clearly as the day the gates closed behind her. She warns him plainly, do not mistake the thorns of this world for the way things were meant to be. The thorns are not the original design. They are what was left after the design was broken. And she fears that if she does not pass this memory on before she dies, her grandchildren will grow up believing exile is simply what home looks like. The structure of her final days in this tradition is deliberate. Adam dies first on the same day of the week he was formed. Eve outlives him by 6 days, a quiet mirror of the 6 days of creation. Where the Creator spent 6 days building rivers and mountains and stars, she spends her last 6 days unbuilding her ties to the earth, one memory at a time, passing each one to her children before it can be lost. For those 6 days, she is the only person alive who has stood inside the garden. Every soul born since owes their existence to her, and not one of them can fully carry the weight of what she alone witnessed. She refuses food. She refuses rest. Her body weakens, but in this telling, her mind sharpens, fixed on the horizon, as though she might still catch some trace of the light she lost. She is not only mourning her husband. She is functioning in this story as the last living bridge between 2 worlds, the world of her descendants spreading out around her, and the unseen world Adam has just entered. She can sense both. They can sense neither. On the 4th day, she falls silent mid-sentence. Her eyes stay open, but she no longer responds to her children's voices or their hands on her shoulders. She has entered something the old text describes as deeper than sleep, her body present in the cave, her awareness somewhere else entirely. Then the sky above the cave is said to tear open, not gradually, but all at once, like fabric pulled apart by a force too strong to resist. What she sees is not darkness. It is a chariot of overwhelming light, drawn by 4 enormous wing shapes whose brightness blots out the sky for miles. The light is the same light she remembers from the garden, warm, alive, intentional. Riding within it, surrounded by ranks of unearthly attendants, is Adam's soul, escorted by the archangels Michael and Gabriel, the very first human soul, in this account, ever to be carried into the world beyond. She watches him brought to a pool of impossibly clear water, washed until the garment of light he wore in Eden, stripped from him at the moment of exile, is restored. His brightness returns. He is, in this telling, made whole again. That vision breaks something open in her. The guilt she has carried for nearly 1,000 years, the belief that she alone ruined everything beyond repair, loosens its grip. She understands, watching Adam restored, that death is not simply punishment. It is a doorway. The exile, however long it lasts, is not the end of the story. By the 5th day, she knows her remaining time is measured in hours. She calls for every living member of her family to gather, sons, daughters, grandchildren, descendants from every branch of the growing human family. And they come from the hills and valleys to stand before the first mother one last time. She has no wealth to leave them. The earth is still wild and largely unclaimed. What she gives them, instead, are words. She tells them a day will come when the whole earth is washed by water, a flood that will scour away the corruption already beginning to take root among her children's children. And she tells them another reckoning will follow, far down the long road of time, not water this time, but fire, a trial that will test the world in a way they cannot yet imagine. But she pairs the warning with a promise. Her bloodline, she tells them, will survive both. The flood will not erase it, and the fire will not consume it. And from her own line, she says, will come one who finally walks back through the gates that were shut against them, bringing the whole scattered family of humanity home with him. It is, in this old tradition, one of the earliest recorded promises of a deliverer, spoken not by a king or a priest, but by a dying woman at the mouth of a cave, to a family still learning how to grieve. When she finally dies on the 6th day, the old text describes the ground itself responding, not with violence, but with a slow, deep pulse, as though the earth recognized the return of the dust it had once shaped into her. Her sons wrap her body in white cloth and prepare it with fragrant spices, performing what the tradition calls the first funeral rites in human history, each gesture deliberate, each one destined to be repeated by every generation that follows. They carry her into the cave of treasures, the same dark vault where Adam was laid 6 days earlier, where gold and incense and myrrh, gifts once given to Adam as tokens of a promise yet to be fulfilled, have waited, untouched in the dark. They lay her at his side. The old writers call this the marriage of the grave, two people fashioned from a single origin, separated at the dawn of the world, driven from paradise together, surviving centuries of exile side by side, and now reunited one final time in the quiet of the earth. And then, the story says, something inexplicable happens. The spices and gold resting in that cave begin to release a fragrance so powerful it can be detected far beyond the mountain, a scent unlike anything growing in the world outside, as though the lost aroma of the garden itself had been sealed inside those offerings all along, waiting for the two halves of humanity's first family to be joined again before it could finally be set free. Most people have never heard any version of this account, and the reason is straightforward. The texts that became the most widely circulated version of Genesis were assembled by communities with their own priorities, and the image of Eve as a grieving, visionary elder, a prophet in her own right, did not survive that process intact. What remained in the mainstream tradition was a much shorter story, a single moment of failure, with little room left for what came after. But in the monasteries of the Ethiopian highlands, a different thread of memory was preserved. The conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan and related texts kept alive a fuller picture, not of a woman defined only by mistake, but of someone who spent the rest of her long life trying to make sure her children never forgot what had been lost, and never stopped believing it could be found again. Whether read as sacred history, ancient folklore, or simply one of the oldest surviving expressions of human grief and hope, the account offers something rare, a portrait of the first mother not as a footnote, but as the keeper of a memory she refused to let die with her. If a story this old could survive quietly in mountain monasteries for over 1,000 years, it raises an honest question worth sitting with, not as proof of hidden conspiracies, but as a reminder of how much of the ancient world's storytelling never made it into the version most of us were taught. What else from that wider tradition is still waiting to be read?